Welcome to the Marketing Meeting podcast. And today I'm meeting with Chris Walker. Many of you know Chris from B2B growth and marketing world. He built Refine Labs, and it's one of the most influential companies shaping modern B2B marketing. He's now founder of Encoded, a neuroscience-backed training system built around performance, human performance, and identity. He just released his new book, which is here. I'm holding it in my hands for people who are watching to the video, The Frequency Era, which we are going to talk more of it today. Welcome, Chris, to the show.
Amazing to be here. Excited to dive in.
So almost for more than 15 years, every morning at 6:30, around 7, I leave home. I go to one of the nicest places that is around me, get a coffee, and read a book. That has been going on. It's just like the morning routine that I have to do almost every day, except some like very few exceptional days. And the way that I understand a good book for me is how it makes me feel when I open it and I start reading it at around 7 o'clock in the morning. And this book made me feel good. And I was surprised with that because of the fact that it's talking about the AI era, which is the frequency era, as you call it. And usually when I read something around AI and so on, I get a little bit nervous and stressed out, to be honest. Whereas reading this book gave me some sort of clarity, which I loved it. So I hope all the others that are reading the book enjoys it as well. But I'm curious to start how you made the move from B2B growth to writing this book, because you were one of the most influential people in that world, in B2B growth world. Could you tell a bit about the story of that shift?
Sure. So first off, I'm pumped that you enjoyed the book. I've gotten so many amazing reviews and DMs about it, specifically on like the level of clarity. I think the sentiment in the market is very much fear-mongering and misleading. And I think that this book provides a unique perspective that people can use to be able to navigate this time with confidence and clarity. So I appreciate the review. Now, the way that I work is I work at systems level thinking. And I think that is one of my superpowers, and a superpower that I believe that anyone could cultivate with the right like training and intention. Now, when we think about that, in both Refine Labs and now what I'm doing with Encoded and what I published in the book of the Frequency Era, which is a macroeconomic sort of societal level view of it, is systems level thinking. Now, in what happens is that a majority of people are deep in a single specialization. They're really deep and they're like trying to be the best CMO, right? They're really deep and they're trying to be the best therapist, neuroscientist, performance researcher, or something like that. And what happens when you go really deep into a specialization is that you miss all the connections of everything that goes around it, right? And so what I did in marketing is that I approached marketing with a lens of marketing, sales, product, pricing, customer research, strategy, financials and metrics. And I put all of them together. And when you bring all that stuff together, it's like, whoa, like this is obvious. Like we should be doing marketing differently. Now, the shift into Encoded was part personal, me realizing that I had done this for myself and the results that I had gotten from it were truly profound. And so I was like, whoa, like actually this is the way that I could contribute most to society. And then the second piece of it was acknowledging that the issues that occur in B2B marketing are actually symptoms of a larger problem. It's not a marketing problem. It's a company cultural, organizational level problem that is created from the capital stack. And once you acknowledge that, you realize that no amount of marketing philosophy, no amount of data, no amount of first principles thinking is going to resolve the issues that are in B2B marketing if the capital stack doesn't change. And so once those two things sort of locked into place, I was like, okay, like I'm going to detach from the marketing stuff. I'm going to start working on Encoded. And then at the macroeconomic level from the book and the physiological level that I provided in chapter 9 and 10, That is also systems level thinking, connecting a ton of different domains into a comprehensive story that explain what is going on in a research and science backed way. And so I'll leave it at that and let you drive the conversation forward.
You traced the book back through economic history, and which I was surprised to start reading from the industrial era, agricultural era, and so on. So you define what is scarce and what is valuable at each era, so that you are able to give an example from today. Could you please walk us through those eras and how it resonates today?
Sure. So at the most fundamental level, what happens in society is that the economy organizes around a scarce premium resource. And then once that scarce premium resource is established, then the economy organizes around it and societal infrastructure organize around it, like education, where people live, a lot of different components around it. And once the scarce resource becomes abundant, typically through some level of automation, the supply and demand dynamics change. That resource is no longer a premium resource, and it moves to a different scarce premium resource. And then the economy and society reorganize around it again. And so I'll walk through a little bit of the history because I think it's valuable. In 1800, 90% of the people that worked and participated in the economy worked on a farm. It's easy to underestimate the skills that these people had from a 200-year looking back, but the skills at the time were the most valuable skills in the economy: how to read the weather patterns, how to understand what soil is ready to be planted, how to understand the physiology of an animal and whether it was going to get sick or not. And depending on those level of skills, you lost an animal, you lost a year of farming, or different things like that. They were very economically consequential, and therefore the economy paid a premium around it. Now, in 1890, automation started to automate some of these skills. The mechanical reaper, the tractor, and over time, over the next 100 years, most of the farming skills had been fully automated. And now, in 100 years later, 4% of people that worked in the economy worked on a farm. So from 90% to 4% in about 100 years. And what happened is that not all the people that no longer worked on a farm, it's not like they were all unemployed and they did nothing and lived on universal basic income. The premium moved. And what happened was the premium moved from physical labor, using your muscles and working on a farm, to skilled labor, organizing production, mass production of things. And that moved from the agricultural era to the industrial era. And then a majority of people in the economy worked in factories. 65% of people then started to work in factories. These were the people that were the most valuable and the highest paid people in the economy. Other things in society shifted as well. People stopped moving from farming towns. They moved into cities that worked around factories and things like that. The 30-year mortgage got established because you were going to work at that factory your whole life and get a pension, so you were going to live in the same town for your whole life, and that was where some of those things originated. And people stopped being apprentices on farms, and they started going to vocational schools to learn these trade skills to work in factories. So you can see how where people live, the education system, other things reorganize around the shift. Now, then there started to be automation that started to automate the people that worked in factories. It was called programmable automation. It got introduced in around the 1970s. The people that worked in factories had been there for 20 years. They developed these tangible skills. They're the highest paid people in the economy. If they just lasted 20 more years, they would be able to retire with a pension and live a great life. And now this automation is coming in to automate their job. Now, at that point, what happens is that people need to understand what is actually happening. What's happening is that the scarce premium resource in the economy, which at that point was managing the production, was being automated. And what happens at each of these levels is it's an invitation for humans to elevate to their next level of capacity. So the people that won during that transition shifted from being a skilled labor worker that made money with their muscles and their hand-eye coordination, and shifted to a knowledge worker, the people that made money using their brain, the information they have in their brain and how they apply it. And the people that move early in these transitions experience asymmetric advantages for themselves and their family for the rest of their life. It actually, for the people that moved and started to become knowledge workers, got a 20-year advantage over the people that continued to work in the factories. 20 years of professional experience, knowledge, their family growing up that way, and a variety of other things. And over time, the factory economy continues to decline while the knowledge economy continues to grow. And then once the transition is complete, people don't even remember that this happened before, and it just becomes the normal rules of society, which is what we've all lived in up until this point, right? Most of us, including myself, didn't look back until I looked back in history, didn't realize this already happened before. To us, it just feels like, oh, this is the rules of how society and the economy works. And so what's happening is that we are in the third major transition. People that have developed all these tangible, amazing skills throughout their career to be able to process information, develop strategy, accumulate information. Those skills are now becoming less scarce, and therefore the economy is paying less of a premium, and therefore we will see declining jobs and income levels for people that are pure knowledge workers for the next 15 to 30 years in a declining economy driven by artificial intelligence. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody is fucked, right? Like that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that if we recognize that the scarce premium resource is shifting, and then we work to develop the skills and the capacities of the future, we actually have this is the biggest opportunity of our life. And so I'm excited to go deeper into that, but that's sort of the historical patterns that we've been able to match, and every single transition works exactly the same with different context.
We are ending this information era and we are entering a new era where things are collapsing so that we can change. What are the things that are collapsing and not working right now with the new era coming in?
Yeah, so first let's talk about collapse, because this is interesting, right? So technically the agricultural era collapsed, right? Like the people that worked in a farm, and now it's down to like 2 or 3% of the economy, and the factories collapsed, right? And each time it did, it actually created more opportunity for more people in more desirable life conditions. And so what I'm saying is the exact same thing is going to happen again. Imagine in 1970, the doctor that worked in the town, right? They were the only one who had the information about the symptoms. You couldn't look it up on Wikipedia. There was no ChatGPT. There was no way to figure out what was going on. The doctor had information that nobody else had, and therefore the economy paid a premium for it. It was incredibly scarce, right? And it took medical school, lots of money, and decades of professional experience to acquire that level of knowledge. And so and then same thing for lawyers, for engineers, for basically any profession. And so the economy was organized around that time. And for anyone, you can just listen to what I'm saying. It's like, it's not really like that anymore, right? First the internet, then social media, and now AI has made it totally undeniable that just information is no longer as scarce as it used to be. And so the economy of the information era organized around 4 key assumptions. The first assumption is that information is scarce, right? And so if information is scarce, the response is to accumulate as much of the scarce information as you can. The second one is that working harder is an advantage. And so if we work harder and we work for 60 hours a week, we will acquire more information, more professional relationships, and therefore we will have a tangible advantage over somebody else that only works 20 hours a week. The third one is that credentials signal competence. So we collect credentials, whether that's the job title, the MBA, the professional degree at Harvard or Yale. We collect, or the certification for AI. We collect all these credentials to signal that we are competent, and then we deliver a resume to tell people that we have this information. And then lastly, that conditions are stable enough to plan long term. And so those were the 4 assumptions that built the information era. And how a majority of people approach their life and career are built on those underlying assumptions that most people think are facts, not are things that are conditions of the current economic era. And so what happens is those assumptions are collapsing. First, information is no longer scarce, right? It's no longer that valuable. It's declining in premium. Collecting more of it is not driving a sustainable advantage anymore. Second, working harder. It used to work if you were competing with a human, but now you're competing with an AI robot that's going to continue to get better, faster, and cheaper over time. It's not a sustainable advantage. Credentials like an MBA or going to college. You can see plenty of people that went to college, got $100,000 in debt, and can't even get an entry-level job anymore, right? The credential certifies information. The premium of the information it certifies is going down. Therefore, the value of the credential is going down with it. And then lastly, that conditions are stable enough to plan. We all can see how quickly things are changing geopolitically, economically, professionally. All of these things are happening way faster. And so in 1990, it made sense to make a 10-year plan, to think that I'll just climb the corporate ladder and get a promotion and a little bit of a raise. And there wasn't a huge amount of inflation and all these different things were there. So I could reliably plan for 10 years and just follow this little map. Now, if you make a life plan, the plan's broken in 6 months. It's like, that level, the conditions are no longer stable enough to plan in that way. And so people that continue to follow the assumptions of the old era while we're in this transition are experiencing symptoms. The symptoms, we have a global mental health crisis, right? We have people that are 30 years old that are saying, I did everything right. I got the degree. I climbed the corporate ladder. I work 60 hours a week and I can't even afford my groceries, right? I've followed all the rules of what I was supposed to do and it's not working for me. And the reason is because the rules have changed, right? So we're playing a new game with old rules about how we approach our professional and personal life. And so when we acknowledge that and we start playing a new game based on a new economy, we can find abundance, we can find success, we can find fulfillment by just adopting new rules about how the world works.
Let's jump into the new era, and you call it the frequency era. Could you tell me why it is the frequency era? Or maybe before explaining that, you can also tell me like what is abundant right now, which we know this information is abundant, and what is scarce in this new era.
Absolutely. And so when we look back in history, right, let's just start with the industrial era. People made money with their muscles. It was like endurance, hand-eye coordination, things like that. And when that started to be automated, people elevated to a new level of their capacity that they didn't know they had, which is that using their cognitive capacity to be able to organize production, to strategize, to plan, to process information. And so at that point, nobody measured the IQ of a factory worker. The factory worker did have an IQ. They did have the capacity to do knowledge work the whole time. Simply, the economy didn't need it yet, and therefore they were never driven to develop or express those capacities, right? Now, most people have built their career on knowledge accumulation and information processing, and that is currently being automated by artificial intelligence. And so what I'm saying is that we all have this capacity known as our frequency, just like the IQ of a factory worker that we have not measured, we have not been driven by the economy to develop, but we all have it. And so what our frequency is our subconscious foundation that drives the capacity of our nervous system. And once our nervous system capacity is set, then we express capacities that occur before we start thinking or doing. And so that could be clarity, self-trust, vision, creativity, deep human connection, details like that. And the key part of it is that it's what we bring to the thinking and doing. And so that's the key element here. It's the shift from how we consciously think to the automatic state of how we approach the thinking, deciding, leading, and doing. And so that is the major shift. It is a new level of capacity. It would be equivalent. I realize people listening to this podcast, it is the equivalent of someone telling a factory worker in 1970 that they should make money using their brain. They're like, what do you mean? For 20 years, I've developed all these skills with my muscles. This is the most valuable thing in the economy. Like, sure, these robots are here, but they're unreliable. They're never going to replace me, right? I get it. But it's actually the same. So the knowledge worker of today is the factory worker of 1970. We're sharing, you have all these capacities, and right now it will feel crazy to hear that from many people.
When I was reading the book, you say somewhere that AI actually hit a ceiling. I mean, there are things that AI can't do. At the end of the day, it's an artificial intelligence, and you have to ask yourself, what is it that is abundant right now because of AI? And what does it cannot do? So like reverse the conversation to yourself. Okay, this is what AI can do, which we know. I mean, process information, data, systems, etc. Whereas there are things that AI cannot do. That's why, and you start giving us like the 12 human traits that we can do, whereas AI possibly cannot do or does it weakly or fails to do it. On that one, for example, for my top art, there are like 12. If you want, you can just tell yours as well, or just go. We can walk through 12 of them also. But my top are the human connection, deep human connection, which we are doing right now. I mean, that's what I love about doing podcasts, actually. And the other one is clarity, and the third one is discernment. So these are my top three. And what are yours, by the way? I mean, since you have 12, maybe all of the 12 are your tops.
I mean, they all matter, right? Because I made the 12. I tend to appreciate the ones that are at the higher levels. And I think that a majority of people that listen to it would underappreciate the ones at the lower level, because the top ones are the sexy ones. But I agree. To me, emotional sovereignty is one of the most powerful ones, and equanimity. A majority of people underappreciate the power in those. And then I love adaptability, creativity, vision, intentionality. So those are some of the ones that really resonate with me. But in reality, they all matter, and so they all kind of work together. And then just to back up a little bit, just so people can feel the whole progression. It's like when the factory started to be automated, the people that succeeded in that transition said, what will this never do, right? No matter how much machinery, how much software they put in it, what will it not be able to do, right? And at the time, it was like, oh, these machines can't think, right? They get programmed to do a certain thing, which is a mechanical activity, right? They'll never be able to think, right? Okay, so all develop the capacities to be able to plan production, to be able to manage relationships of supply chain. I'll be able to find customers and sell it, right? This robot's not going to be able to sell anything, right? And so the people that succeeded realized what are the fundamental limitations of the technology, and then develop the skills of the future that were going to be scarce when the technology created abundance in this previous resource. And so at the very moment, right, artificial intelligence is very good at automating knowledge accumulation, right? It has more information that a human will acquire in 10,000 lifetimes. IQ, right? A majority of AIs score at a higher IQ than almost every single human being on the planet. And with more compute and more stuff, it'll just continue to grow, right? Information processing, right? It can look through an entire document that it would take 3 days for the lawyer to read. It can do it in 30 seconds, right? And as it continues to develop in capacity, it will do it faster, better, and cheaper over time. And so when we look at what it's doing, is it's sort of it's creating abundance in that level of capacity. Now, what is it, right? AI is effectively a predictive engine. It looks back at all the information that it has, it takes a query, and it predicts what would be the most reasonable response to this based on my training and prompts and things like that. And so when you acknowledge that, then you can start to identify what are the limitations of it, right? So one key limitation is it will never come up with a new idea. It can only look back in the past of what's already been created. It can create new combinations of existing ideas, but it will never fundamentally create a new idea. I know this because there's plenty of new ideas in my book, and AI was totally unhelpful, right? So that's one. Another one is discernment, to be able to have to make the decision about what is right for you, right? For your business, for your life, for your children, for your relationship. Like, it will give you a generic answer of what's happened in the past. It will not give you the decision of what is right for you at that exact moment. You have to develop the capacity to be able to make those decisions for yourself, right? So that's a fundamentally underrated capacity. If we look at the entire trajectory of our life, personally and professionally, it has to be the number one factor in our life has to be our decision-making capability. It has to be. We make tons of decisions. It compounds over time. So discernment being a huge one. Deep human connection, which you mentioned, right? So when AI can send a bunch of emails and deliver information, it can perfectly handle the transactional layer of relationships, and it will do it better than a majority of humans. And a majority of humans have been driven to develop that capacity to manage transactional layers that can be automated now. So deep human connection goes through the roof. When people can feel the hollowness of the AI communication, maybe it's not happened there, but over time, as the volume continues to grow, you can see it on Instagram. Like, you can feel the difference between an AI generated post with a pretty girl versus a real one, right? It feels hollow. And so that humans have always had the capability to tell the difference, but we haven't developed the capacity to do it fundamentally. So this will drive that distinction between artificial and real. And so being able to connect deeply with humans, to develop trust that they want to be around you because of who you are. So that one goes through the roof. And then the last one I'll mention, because I don't want to go through all 12 here, is adaptability. And so as conditions continue to shift more quickly, humans that are adaptable, meaning that change and uncertainty is part of the process and you don't get thrown off track when things change, will have a fundamentally massive advantage. And it's different than previously, because when conditions were stable, people were taught to create a map and follow it. And most of the time, it wasn't even your map. It was a map that someone else gave you about what a good life looks like. And you basically follow someone else's map about where you should go. Adaptability is to develop your own compass, meaning that I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years, but I know what direction I'm going to go right now. And I have the trust to be able to, I feel how the terrain changes and navigate my own life. And so I see these as fundamentally, it's hard to, for people that are used to the previous economic era and haven't recognized the shift, it's hard to realize how valuable these capacities are right now, because we're at the beginning of this era, right? And so it's the same thing as somebody going to college in 1970, right? The factories were still the most valuable part of the economy, but the knowledge era was emerging. And so it's the sort of the same thing here. It's an emerging, like, you can look back in research, people have called some of the things that I'm talking about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a very narrow and improper definition of what I'm talking about. But there's been research done for a decade or two, and it's becoming one of the most premium skills in the economy for leaders, and why companies have an X factor has to do with emotional intelligence. Frequency is like 100x definition of what emotional intelligence was. So people have been pointing to it with just imprecise definitions up to this point.
You talked about, I would like to touch base a little bit more about the frequency that we live in, when you are living in a low frequency versus when you are in a high frequency, because we know what AI cannot do, and we know what is scarce as human beings. The things that we talked about, like these 12 human traits that are scarce, where AI cannot replicate that, like the clarity, discernment, deep human connection, and so on. Could you tell me a bit about that systems, as well as what is low and high frequency of the brain?
Sure. So first off, it's not binary. So frequency is there's almost an infinite spectrum. So the second thing is addressing misconceptions. And so the first thing is that high frequency doesn't mean that you're feeling good and you're successful. So it's not a mood. It's not an emotion that you feel. It's not because you have made money or different things like that. There's no correlation between that. The reality is that your frequency does not change very often, and it does not change without intention. And so it's much deeper than what people would think originally. And how it works is that we have tons of ingrained neural pathways in our mind that drive our automatic thinking, behavior, responses, and most importantly, the baseline state of our nervous system. So it's automatically filtering our experience, driving the state of our nervous system, and then based on that, our nervous system then allocates all the resources in our body to where are they going to go: our heart, our digestion, our prefrontal cortex, all these different areas physiologically. And then based on that state and how they're set, the amount of resources that go to our prefrontal cortex allow us to express these capacities before we start thinking. All of that, what I just described, happens in milliseconds all the time without us thinking. So we're not trying to think with clarity. We either are or we aren't, right? We're not trying to trust ourselves. We either do or we don't. It's decided before we think or enter any situation. And so the way that people will resonate with this is that when we do not train our frequency, we experience symptoms. That is similar to if we do not exercise our body, we experience symptoms, right? If we do not exercise, then maybe we get out of breath when we walk the dog around the neighborhood, right? Maybe we're trying to lift something and our back hurts. Maybe we start getting an injury. Maybe our body, our cardiovascular health, our blood pressure changes, our weight changes. We experience symptoms when we do not exercise. The same thing happens when we do not train our frequency. The symptoms are different, but the explanation is the same. So if we do not train our frequency, we experience symptoms of not trusting ourselves, meaning imposter syndrome, second guessing, decision paralysis, slow decision loops, needing to call a coach or 5 people to consult people or ask AI whenever we have to make a decision. It's just symptoms of low self-trust. Lack of clarity. We experience mental noise. We experience overthinking, things like that. We can experience physical symptoms, meaning low sleep quality, waking up in the middle of the night, not being able to fall asleep. We experience symptoms around our emotions. Our emotions are simply just a warning light to be able to look deeper into our frequency. So anxiety, stress, burnout, guilt, frustration, anger, emotional reactivity, not being able to stay calm, all of those are symptoms. They're not conditions. We experience lack of creativity. We end up living our life, how we approach our work, how we approach our life in a very average way. We do not express ourselves at the capacity that we could. And a variety of other symptoms, right? So those are all just basically, people will resonate with that more than like saying self-trust. It's like if you don't have self-trust, you experience all these different symptoms around it. Now, what I think is the coolest thing about frequency is that it can be biometrically measured in devices that have been used clinically for more than 10 or 20 years. Things like heart rate variability is a proxy for nervous system power, right? EEGs measure the frequency distribution of our brain waves. Based on that distribution, it is correlated to our ability to cognitively process and to do those things. And we're not thinking about how to set our brain waves, right? Those are happening automatically. Our VO2 max, our cortisol levels, our hormone balances, all those different things can be measured, and they are proxies for the performance and power of our nervous system. And so just like in the previous era that people measured on IQ and credentials being the main thing, it will move to nervous system capacity being the number one, the equivalent to IQ. And what training our frequency is simply just the most effective way to increase the capacity of our nervous system.
And the things that you explained, like with lower capacity, what do we feel and what do we see as a side effect, is all the things that are scarce right now. Like you said, trust, clarity, all the things that are that links to the lower frequency is what is scarce, what we should be holding on to, and we need to have more of it right now. So that's why, we need to switch from lower frequency to higher frequency. So how do we do that?
So the way that we do it is that we establish new dominant neural pathways in our mind that filter our life automatically and set the capacity of our nervous system. And so the way that it works is that throughout our whole life, We have been, whether it's directly taught, indirectly experienced, or confirmed through our own experience, developed ideas about who we are and how the world works. All right. So, for instance, when I was in high school, like I played in a band and I played baseball. And at some point, they were like, "You need to choose, right? You can't do both of these things. You can't play 3 concerts a week and play 4 baseball games a week. You have to choose." Creative things, you're not going to make any money, right? So do something, do sports, and go to science. Those are things that are responsible, right? And so over time, I just got ingrained that I'm not a creative person. That's for other people, and I'm someone that learns science and does sports, right? And that happens a million times about how the world works, what we should do, who we are even, and it sets the limitations of our own capacity. And so that develops a neural pathway. And then whenever a creative opportunity comes along, it's not like I think about it and say, that's not for me. It automatically gets filtered out. That's for somebody else, right? I'm over here doing these things. And so that's just an example of how it works. So what we do is that we establish new dominant neural pathways through repetition that allow us to interpret the world and who we are in new, empowering ways based on the life that we want to live. And so the way that we do that, handwriting is the most effective way to do it. First, we need to know what's in there right now. How are we filtering our life right now? So for an entrepreneur, for instance, one of the most common ones is, if I slow down, then things will fall apart, right? So that's like a common entrepreneurial subconscious program. It's a subconscious belief, right? And so what that drives is it drives urgency, it drives overworking, it drives feeling guilty when you're on a vacation, it drives you to check your phone while you're at dinner with your family and not be fully present. There's a lot of behavioral tendencies that come from that subconscious belief. And so what we do is that we reestablish a new dominant neural pathway. So whatever.
With the systems that you built with
that's how the
Encoded,
system
right?
gets built. And then on average, it takes 66 days of intentional training to establish a new dominant neural pathway. And once it becomes the new dominant neural pathway, we automatically filter our entire life through that new pathway automatically.
You emphasize handwriting a lot, which is an important thing for me, because it's just like I'm also, as much as I read the books, there is morning writing for me as well, which I recognize writing is getting harder every day as we use the laptops and screens and so on. Why is handwriting that important? I mean, like, is the system has like you have to write a few pages every day, or how does it look like?
So there's the mechanism of handwriting as the first part. And the reason that handwriting is most effective is because it activates 3 different areas of our brain to most effectively drive neuroplasticity, meaning re-establishing new dominant neural pathways. It is far more effective, shown by the activation in the brain, than speaking, typing, reading, visualizing. It just activates more parts of the brain. The second part is the process. Now, in order to establish a new dominant neural pathway, it requires repetition, right? And so when we read something, we're reading different things the whole time, right? When we're typing different things the whole time. So the protocol of Encoded is actually a repetitive process to be able to build a new dominant neural pathway. So we're writing, it's a total of 4 or 5 pages, but a majority of it is the same every day for about 90 days. And so that's establishing that pathway. What happens is the pathway starts to get established, our emotions and baseline state shift. So we have lower, it's not like we've changed, but we have lower internal friction. When we have lower internal friction, the actions that we would take to confirm that belief then become easier. Then we start doing it, we believe it more, and over time, this loop starts to spin. If we believe it more, we do it more, we believe it more, we do it more, until it becomes the default state.
Towards the end of the book, you redefine success. A few years ago, you were scaling Refine Labs, and you were in B2B growth, which is like a very highly challenging and, different level of success for you. Now, how does it look like? You're building something totally different now. Has the definition of success changed for you, or how is it looking like right now in your life?
For sure. So first off, I see this development, this primary method of developing our frequency, to be the equivalent to going to college in 1990, right? Maybe the equivalent to going to college in 1970, right? That's probably a better way to say it. That 20 years from now, maybe it's probably even 5 or 10 years from now, it will be obvious to everyone, right? But in 1970, it wasn't that obvious that I should stop going to vocational school and working in a factory and going to college. So it's early, but to the people that understand it, it's an obvious future and destination. When it comes to success, there's quite a bit of science related to this, and so the way that it works is that we have our underlying intentions. Our intentions then are the underlying driver to our behavior, not what you would write. You would go to an event and you'd write down your why, right? Not what you would say to someone about why you did something, but something that's happening automatically that's the driver of your behavior. Now, throughout the past 50 years, a majority of humans have been conditioned into hedonic drivers or hedonic intentions, which means that the underlying driver of our behavior is to accumulate, prove, impress, or avoid failure. It's hard for many people to admit that to themselves. I get it. It was hard for me to admit that to myself 2 years ago, but it's one of the most empowering things to be able to see that behavior within yourself, because once you see it, then you can change it. And the reality is that it doesn't make you a bad person. It means that you were given intentions subconsciously that you were not aware of, right? And that's just what happens through MTV, through news, through media, through your boss at work, through the people in college, how you were trained in high school, the advice your grandparents gave you. None of those people are bad people. It's just that that's how it happened. And so when you have hedonic intentions, it is proven that you have lower life satisfaction and lower decision quality. And you can see that because it's hard for people that are living paycheck to paycheck to realize it. But there's a lot of rich people that are totally miserable, addicted to drugs, destroy the environment, right? They never see their children. They're divorced, right? They have a bunch of money and no control over their time, right? So there's and a lot historically, people have been conditioned to make that trade, to say, in order to be successful, I basically need to sacrifice everything else. And the definition of success meaning to have money, fame, or power, right?
Yeah.
And then people would trade basically everything in exchange for that. They would destroy the environment. They would sacrifice their relationship with their children. They would lose their marriage. They would have no control over their time. So there's this sacrifice that happened. And that's why you have this low life satisfaction. And the switch is switching to the inverse of that, which is known as eudaimonic intentions. And this is not a new concept. This has been around for thousands of years, believe it or not. And so the difference is switching from driving your success externally to internally, meaning that my success is derived through the development and expression of my own internal capacity. That as I develop and express it, that is the key driver of my success. Meaning that as I develop more creativity in myself, develop my relationships more, express more of who I am, feel better on a day-to-day basis related to my own internal state, that's the driver. And when that is the driver, ironically, we also achieve external success markers, but it's a secondary marker. And so this is not a switch that you make where you just like, oh yeah, like that's how I'm going to do it now. It actually must be conditioned through repetition over a long period of time. It took me years to arrive at this feeling. And it's the same exact thing as going to the gym for 2 years, right? You feel a lot better after doing it for 2 years consistently, and it becomes part of who you are. And you realize, oh, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life, and it's going to consistently improve the rest of my life, right? And so people typically see personal development as an episodic thing. I go to this retreat, and all of a sudden I'm better, right? I pick up this thing, I do this course for 90 days, and then all of a sudden I can just stop and do something else. Fitness really doesn't work that way, right? And so that it's an interesting mindset switch for people to be able to take on, of just an ongoing level of development that's similar to fitness.
And it's also very personal, like anything that you do in fitness, like the things that I can do and very similar body style as I do can do the same things, and it may not work for that person. It's a very for people who are
Must
doing
be
sports for
personalized to your goals, where you are right now. It must be measured on an ongoing basis. The plan must adapt to you. All of the same key parts of a elite fitness or physical training routine have been adopted into the Encoded system in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because, I can relate to that as someone who's doing a lot of sports as well for so many years. So before we close, I want to ask two questions about B2B growth, because like the things that you said, which are like too abundant right now, is many of the things that has been done in B2B marketing as well. Like, sending massive cold emails and producing content, which is like, or like, trying to educate people on social platforms, which we think that, okay, if you give people information, then your platforms would be growing. That's like some of the things that B2B growth is based on. How do you think that it is changing for B2B companies right now? Like in the age of abundant AI and information, what's left to do for them, or should they be changed? They should be changing as well.
So when you have a single person, that person has a frequency. When you collect a bunch of people together, those people will have a resonant frequency. Over time, if those people spend enough time together, they will assimilate to the same frequency. Okay, now that we have that established, once a company takes extractive capital, meaning a majority of venture capital or private equity, even things that call themselves conscious capital, in a lot of ways are extractive. The company takes the extractive capital and immediately gets driven to the lowest frequency possible. That means that the company is, you'll know as I call out the symptoms, they're in a rush all the time, artificial urgency and pressure. They're on Zoom meetings all the time. It feels very transactional. You spend more time talking about competitors than talking about customers. You spend more time managing politics than actually doing creative or important work. The downstream impacts of that on the people are very clear. People feel stressed. They feel burnt out. They don't sleep as well. They wake up feeling drained. They have Sunday scaries. They are not creative. They're not driven to be creative or be innovative because they just want to stay safe and keep their job, right? So that is what a low frequency company feels like. Now, a majority of venture capital and tech and private equity driven companies are that, right? They are that. And so what will happen is that over time, those companies will arrive at a significant disadvantage because all the things that matter in the future are the things that their culture suppresses. So they are suppressing creativity. They're suppressing deep human connection with their customers, with their ecosystem, with their team. They're suppressing adaptability. They're suppressing self-trust. They're suppressing emotional sovereignty, all the things that matter. And so when you have that, the function of the company declines. The decision-making capability of every single person in the company goes down. The creativity goes down, all these different things. And what happened, and the connection with your market. And so when we think about, sending an email, like running an ad campaign, building a website, like it's way too tactical. It's the actual problem, the actual issue is so fundamental, right? And so trying to make a better ad campaign, or even like what I did for 5 years, which is share tons of philosophy and tons of data on why this makes sense. When the company operates at a low frequency, especially because the capital allows it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what makes the most sense. It doesn't matter based on merit or first principles. What matters is that 96% of these companies are going to fail. 4% are going to win. We're going to run our playbook and let the 4% win, and the other ones don't matter. And so, the switch that for if you're in a marketing department, the switch to make is to select a high frequency company, and to realize if you are in a low frequency company, you will become a low frequency person or you can leave. There's no other way to say it. You will not change it. And so the company selection will change over time. You can see already happening in San Francisco. Like I get the reports of San Francisco. You have 10 mega companies that everyone's trying to join, and all the other ones, people just don't like being there, right? And it sucks to even be a founder of them. So we're seeing this happen already. And over time, talent will gravitate to its high frequency does not mean the most successful company or the one where you make the most money in your stock options. It means the companies that operate in a way that allow you to express the full capacity of your potential. And so over time, I think people will, it's like, I just reached a point where I was like, I'm tired of people are still talking about MQLs and the 60-40 brand split with some like philosophical thing that got published in 2014. It's like, at some point we need to realize that having these conversations don't matter. It's not about this. So I just eventually got tired of it and decided to leave.
Yeah, but for people because there are people already in the B2B world, probably most of them would be listening to this right now. So AI makes content, outbound information cheaper and more abundant. And if you were to run a B2B company right now, what would you do differently in your team or with how you do marketing? Is there anything that you would do differently, or you have any suggestions for these people?
I would highly consider the stack of the capital and where it comes from. I would evaluate the frequency of the company. I would select a company based on a high frequency, right? So it's like people want an easy answer, but this is the actual, I've made my career telling people the things they don't want to hear, but they need to hear, right? And so it's like, if you work at a company that operates this way, it doesn't fucking matter what you do in marketing. It will, no matter what you try, you can try something innovative and you will be punished in 2 months and get fired. CMOs literally won't do anything innovative because they know they're going to get fired if they do it.
Yeah.
And so it's like you can try to come up with an idea of what to do, but the reality is that you're operating in an environment that doesn't support it. And so it's to find an environment where you can thrive, right?
Yeah.
Now, once you find an environment where you can thrive and these things are permissible, right? It's not that they're permissible, that's encouraged. It's a natural way that the company operates. That then it becomes creating a level of depth and creativity that connect with your market. And so it's a business strategy too. It's product pricing, positioning. It's the whole thing. But to be able to connect with the market at a deeper level, which is the opposite of what people are driven to do with volume up until this point, right? So it's way more depth and therefore lower volume. And I think that packaging new ideas, right? The difference between making 1,000 pieces of average content for automating your LinkedIn content for 1,000 posts and comments versus making one meaningful long form piece of content that just quality and creativity go through the roof, and the value of volume is going down. So at a content level and a strategy level, that's sort of how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, and also when you think about the fundamentals of the book, which we are in a shift. Some of the things are scarce, some of the things are abundant, and which has totally changed over the last 2-3 years, since 2022, I guess. 2023. So it's just not about looking to the marketing plan, but it's about seeing what is scarce now, and which is human capital and human traits, the 12 human traits that you told. And how do you first, instead of looking to the marketing plan, how do you first make sure that those human traits are enhanced within your teams? Creativity, which is okay, do we really have to post 3 times a week, which was almost the rule for all companies on LinkedIn, which is not working. We know that. So I like that. So for people who are interested learning about Encoded, is there a website that they can go into, or how can they know more about it? First of all, I highly suggest that they read this book because it's all about understanding fundamentals, in my opinion. But secondly, what can they do?
Yeah, so I think the book is a great opener for why does this matter and how does it work, right? So I think that's a good opener for people that are interested in this. It is highly driven to economics and professional work. but there's also a huge element in personal that become really valuable, where people get massive impact, where they feel more freedom over their time, deeper relationships, less stress, a lot of things like that. And if you want to learn more, you can visit encoded.ai. There is a website. There's plenty of stuff. So you can feel free to check it out there. And yeah, I'd invite people too that are interested in.
Thank you so much for joining me at this podcast, and to nurture your human traits over this summer. That's upcoming summer. I mean, summer hasn't arrived to New York yet. I can say it's still raining a bit. What are you doing this summer?
We'll probably spend some time in Portugal and Croatia, and some places in Europe for a month, and then we're working on what the next chapter in our lives is going to be. So looking at moving from Austin, Texas to somewhere else. And so we'll see where that lands for us.
Yeah. And when we were talking about places to move, actually, the decision that you would give is much different than I would give, which none of it can be driven by AI. And then we all know that. Mm-hmm. Thanks so much for this wonderful chat. And I'm really happy that I get to know you further by this book. And I hope I get to see you in person as well in the next chapter of your time. And I hope it's by the sea, because that's where life gets better, I guess.
Can't wait. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you for enjoying the book, and hope to see you soon.